Hey guys, Ghazzy TV here with another Path of Exile video. In this one we're going to talk about a whole lot of things, but it's all going to be about the Spectres in Path of Exile 3.13, what's happened, what's good, comparison to golems, a lot of things that we're going to go through. Let's just dive into it. I start off with a Spectre build after I was done with my mage skeletons, and I've tried out a bunch of different Spectres, and I'm going to go through my opinions on them, which is best for what in my opinion, and what I've done. I killed Awakener 8 Series as a service with a Tabula Rasa and a shit helmet, so I had my Spectres in my chest piece with a +1 spells level dagger with a trigger craft, which cost me like 3 chaos to buy the weapon. I did have a Victorious Charity, which you can see here. I also had the Triad Grip, and I was using the Primal Crushclaws Lobsters. I had a shit belt, not the Torrents. I started upgrading my gear. I did have a chest with +1 to Spectre, however, later on. So that was pretty easy. Then again, Awakener is all about the skills and moving around. So once you learn the fight, it becomes very, very easy. Besides that, the clear speed of these Spectres has been a little bit so-so. So I want to talk about the Primal Crushclaws because I believe the Primal Crushclaws are probably the best Spectres in the current situation because of their single target capabilities. I currently have about 10 million Shaper DPS. And that gear is with a Harvest Crafted helmet, which looks more expensive than it is. I will obviously make a video on how to craft these type of helmets very, very cheaply. That's going to come out in a couple of days, I reckon. And then we have a +1 Intelligence Gem Amulet, which is alteration crafted, and that's pretty easy. Can be a bit expensive early on. The boots are just Elder Boots, spamming Bound Fossil with Shuddering till you get movement speed with +1 Ray Spectre Gem. Very easy to craft as well. So these things are very easy to achieve. Low budget was running around in tier 16 maps. Clear speed was a bit so-so. I did feel the need for a surging vitality, so I'm going to show you some of these things right now. So this is basically the starting tree I went off with in the build I played. No cluster jewels whatsoever. I spec'd into Ravenous Horde. I went to Death Attunement. All of these things because I didn't want to spend the currency on buying oils for the amulet. So this was straight up just low budget approach with the build. With the skills, you can see that this is with another type of Spectre, so I'm going to change this by simply doing this. And we're going to add in Primal Crushclaws, and I'll show you the way I did it with the Primal Crushclaws. So, I didn't like using Feeding Frenzy because it seemed like they were running away from me when I did this. Instead, I chose to always have Predator in here because it was just more reliable. For the sake of nice PvP crashing on me, I used Predator instead, which kept them more reliable for me to target when I had a bigger rare that I needed to kill, or a boss, for example. And the other gems I was using was Melee Physical. I'll have this POV linked in the descriptions below. So, if we're using Predator, Spectre, Minion damage. And let's see what we got. So we have minion damage, elemental damage with attacks, Predator, melee physical, and melee splash. And then I changed melee splash for multi-strike. And that's the way I played the Spectres. So first off, I tried changing this with a Feeding Frenzy instead of Predator. And this was a terrible decision. Because sometimes when I convocated them next to an enemy that was hitting me, they would run off to other targets far away from me. I did not like using Feeding Frenzy at all. So instead I went with Predator, and that felt a lot better for clearing. Splash changed for multi-strike, and it was really, really smooth. So these Primal Crushclaws are pretty cool. They have a 75% conversion to cold, and one of their other abilities have 50% conversion to cold, which is why I started off with a 4 green Triad Grip gloves with them. Grip of the Council will be a better choice. However, Grip of the Council is obnoxiously expensive right now, so I wanted to wait with that. But you can always use a Triad Grip and make very good use of them. And this is thanks to the Skitterbot Bone Chill combination that is super effective to play with. So that's basically the Primal Crushclaws. A bit lacking in clear speed, but feels better with higher budgets in terms of clearing, whereas they excel vastly in a single target. We reached about 10 million Shaper DPS. I think we're around 12 now with one cluster setup. And I think that once we move over to a CI high budget with this build, I wouldn't be surprised if we can reach up to 40 or 50 million Shaper DPS. And if you want to go crazy, you can easily get 100 plus. But that's just for the absolute high budget gear with crazy modifiers. So something that's really good with Spectres right now is that we're able to craft some really crazy gear for the sake of endgame. For example, like I talked about, the helmet looks more crazy than it is. The base of this helmet in the current market costs about 6 exalteds, and then you just max on bound fossils for less than an X, and you'll have a +3 minion damage, and then you just use harvest crafting to get the remaining modifiers. So it's not that expensive to craft these things. The problem with it is obviously the huge risk of getting scammed when you're buying harvest crafts in the current state through a Discord server, and it's also obnoxiously annoying and takes a long time to sort. So the current market prices for these helmets is kind of worth it because you save so much time and headache, and also don't risk getting scammed if you buy the helmet instead. Other options that you can use instead of melee physical is actually damage on full life, because these Spectres create some water geyser similar to what Merveil is doing. These geysers are not melee physical based damage, and because of that, damage on full life would actually scale these things, and they proc off their default attack, it seems. So when you use multi-strike, you spawn a ton of them, and therefore you could use damage on full life to scale them even more, to do even more damage. I decided not to, because I didn't want to have the risk of a support gem not being used because of them taking some damage versus the harder boss encounters like Maven and the boss rooms in Maven, which I'm going to show you in this footage right now. Because right now we have multi-strike linked, and I'll show you how it looks with these geysers in this fight. And after this, we're going to go in and talk about the difference with the other Spectres a bit briefly, and my opinions on them. So basically, build is pretty solid. I now have multi-strike instead of splash in, and all I do is get to the boss and complicate, and then you can see these geysers here on the ground. All of these makes it impossible to see anything on the screen. Impossible. And it's terrible. But it looks cool. So there's that. So there's that little thing. So that's pretty cool. But that's how these Primal Crushclaws are working, and they have obnoxious amount of single target damage. So moving on to the low budget stage of this that I want to show you before we talk about the other Spectres. What I did later when I could oil Ravenous Horde was to remove all of these points to get it to Ravenous Horde. And I would buy a terrible large cluster jewel. They cost almost nothing, like a 12 passive minion damage costs nothing. Put that in here, and the only mod you really care about is renewal. However, if you buy yourself a jewel, you can actually use the Reforge Crit, a Harvest Craft, which guarantees Vicious Bite. And that's how you can very easily and deterministically create jewels like this, where you get Vicious Bite and you keep re-rolling with that Harvest Craft Reforge Crit till you hit Vicious Bite with Renewal and an Open Prefix. The Open Prefix should be augmented with an Attack Craft, which gives you Rotten Claws. The reason we do this is because Rotten Claws lands in the middle spot, so you can save 2 points by not speccing it. And then you can get the Precise Commander, Vengeful Commander, medium clusters to then move on. For the low budget, you only care about renewal. So the point with this is to get renewal, preferably with another mod, so that renewal ends up in one of the other spots here. And you want to get that node and pick up the jewel slots. And the main priority on the low budget is to get yourself a Surging Vitality. Even one is enough to make the build feel so much more comfortable to play with. A Surging Vitality jewel currently costs about 2 chaos, if I'm not mistaken. We can double check that real quick. Oh, it's up to 5 and 10 chaos right now. So it's not a lot of currency, but it's definitely worth the investment, because every 4 seconds you will regenerate 10% of your life. If you can get 2 of these, that's optimal. It helps a lot with sustainability and makes the build feel a lot smoother, especially versus the currently content with a ritual with damage over time being taken. And especially the chaos damage ones are terrible. So that's basically all the information I have for you regarding the Primal Crushclaws. I will be updating the forum guide, which is linked in the descriptions below, for the Spectres, and with either tonight or within a few days at least, I will be posting a high budget version of these builds as well. If you are wondering where to get these Spectres, go into the global 6666 channel, in which myself and many other veterans and community members are sharing Spectres with one another, where you can get these Spectres among others. So the other things I want to talk about are pretty straightforward. So first things first, a lot of people are wondering about the Frost Auto Scout Spectres, and these are the shittiest Spectres you can ever think of. The thing is with these Spectres is that they used to be very good. They have terrible single targets. Clearing with these, however, is pretty smooth. The problem though is that they have pure cold damage. They never actually deal any fist damage. We neither can get the fist as extra cold, we can never use the triad grip, we can't use grip of the council. So the limitations of these makes them pretty shit for a single target. So I would never suggest Frost Auto Scouts. The other approach is of course Redemption Sentries. These Spectres are amazing, especially if you can afford an Awakened 4th gem for the sake of clearing. We did some tests earlier, you can probably see that in the gameplay footage in the screen in the background. Redemption Sentries are doing fist damage with a conversion of 75% into cold, which means we want to use Grip of the Council. And they are absolutely amazing at clearing. Their single target is a bit lacking compared to other options. So when it comes to range Spectres that are vastly superior in clearing compared to the Primal Claw, I would suggest looking into the Artless Assassins. Now the Artless Assassins is a bit tricky, and I'll be very brief in this. I'll probably make another video being specifically for these bad boys. Artless Assassins are almost identical to the Redemption Sentries, but they're using a Burning Arrow ability. And then they have a arrow shotgun ability, which they seem to favor with a 10-second cooldown. That's the one you want to use, scale the most for boss fights. So basically they're using explosive arrow and burning arrow. They have a 75% scaling of fist into fire, and this means that we would like to use triad grip with 4 green to convert 100% to cold. The problem is that the 75 can't be removed. This conversion calculation ends up with them having 33% fire damage and 67% cold damage, which means we can utilize Scatterbot with Bone Chill, and we can very effectively use Hatred and still EE with Lightning. These Spectres clear approximately as well as the Redemption Sentries, but thanks to their shotgun ability, they actually do very well with that 67% cold damage on that ability versus bosses, which helps the Redemption Sentries. Now, one of my moderators, Tibakakaka, has been playing a version of this, and I don't want to say it, but here it goes. He's calling the build the Song of Ice and Fire, or Fire and Ice. Basically, he's using 3 Artless Assassins for the boss damage, and he's using 2 Redemption Sentries for extra clearing. And this is because they are both scaling with the exact same support gems, and it's actually good. It's actually good, guys. Anyways, so those are the best Spectres for clearing, in my opinion. Syndicate Operatives are dead. Dead. Don't play them. They're dead. Dead. I did give Slave Drivers a try as well. They were surprisingly able to survive even in tier 16 maps, in hard roll tier 16 maps. I was very surprised to see that. Their damage, even with Algor Mortis unique gloves, had terrible single target damage, despite proper helmets like the helmet I showed you earlier. They had terrible single target damage. Clearing felt very reliable though, but yeah, no. So just to recap, Primal Crushclaws are, in my opinion, the best Spectres you can use. I think that the Artless Assassins, together with 2 Redemption Sentries, would be the best for clearing, and a healthy mix with these range Spectres for the sake of single targets. I think the Frost Auto Scouts should be forgotten. They're terrible. And a last little note is that the new Spectres we've found, teleporting Spectres, whatever they were called, the Flickershades, they are currently bugged. I will keep you guys updated as soon as I hear more from the developers I've talked to. They are looking into it. As soon as they get fixed, not only do they look the best, I believe that if they fix these within reasonable time, we're probably looking at the best Spectre in the game for the current state of summoners. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe for more content, and make sure you never forget that the fact that Primal Crushclaws are called lobsters and not crabs. And once you've got that into your brains, we'll see you next time. Stay safe. Keep rocking.